Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, here to discuss opening round. Yes, we've had our two games done in our kind of AFL soft opening, with the two games in New South Wales going ahead, and then we actually hit some proper footy this week, round one, with all 9 games on. I think most of the AFL and Supercoach community are hoping the AFL, even if they want to keep it the name opening round, becomes a 9-game start to the season next year. But nonetheless, we still have 2 games that we can review here, which have massive Supercoach implications for our starting sides. As always, check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular YouTube, Spotify. Get in touch with us via X Supercoach Insider 100 or Swizz26 for me directly. All right, so the season officially kicked off on Friday night after, obviously, Cyclone Alfred came through and delayed the Brisbane-Geelong game. We had the Swannies, who were quite disappointing, 11-10-76 to the Hawks, 14-12-96. I picked the Swans thinking the Hawks wouldn't have the firepower up forward to kick enough goals. And, yeah, they definitely found a way through their midfield. Meekie kicking 2 goals and Will Day, best on-ground performance, even missing a lot of that third quarter and getting tagged a lot in that second half, kicked the 3 goals and was just brilliant for the Hawks. So the way this will work, I'll just have a quick review of both games, and then I'm going to go through some Supercoach projections in regards to how much players are going to potentially rise and fall over the first few weeks, and hopefully that'll help you guys starting your opening sides. So in regards to the Sydney Hawthorn game, from the Sydney point of view, there were a couple of really good performances, and that was Matt Roberts. He's been locked in my side for a couple of weeks now, maybe even a little bit longer. 26 touches, 9 marks, and had the 2 tackles for his 124 Supercoach. Only the one kick-in. Blakey was the one getting a lot of the kick-ins, so he had 26 touches, but 10 of them were from the kick-ins. And as we go through the actual Swans details there, you can see in that kick-in part, Blakey had 10 and played on 100% of the time, which probably inflated his score. So him kicking a goal, you're not going to get that too often from the half-back back pocket. So it's still a very good player, the Lizard, but Matt Roberts, for his value, is definitely somebody that we need to be considering strongly for our side, especially the fact that he's rebounding off half-back. They want the ball in his hands. Was able to get the 9 marks as well, so just shows that he's the link between the back line and the midfielders. Chad Warner, contract year, did everything he needed to do. 21 touches, kicked 2 goals. He will be interesting if he spends time up forward. I don't think it's going to happen enough for us to get it, but wouldn't it be great if we could pick him up as a mid-forward at some point throughout the year. Grundy was very poor. Heaney, the 21 touches, but did have the 7 tackles. Did Isaac Heaney sort of things, 105. Probably a little bit lower than what I probably expect from Heaney, but as I said the other day, wouldn't be surprised if he kind of still averaged 110, 115, especially at the start of the year. With Gordon missing, he's just that good, and he'll find ways to score. Patton was an interesting one. Started really poorly from a footy perspective and then found his way, 12 touches, the 67 Supercoach. Massive gap between his DT and his Supercoach. He was quite effective, but I think he's probably done enough. He is that little bit more expensive from that rookie price at 133, but the fact that he's got that dual position status already does make him appealing. The guy that I wrote about the other day, Corey Warner, just the 10 touches, I was a little bit disappointed, but he did have the 4 tackles, playing off that half-forward role. I think there'll be better games ahead for him. He's just re-signed for 2 more years. I think he will be part of that 22 each week. I feel like there's other players that are more likely to be sub-candidates. So, I don't mind him so much, but he is that higher elevated price. I was really hoping to sort of see him get on the scoreboard and turn that into sort of a 70-point game. But the fact that he didn't get to the scoreboard and he still was able to score 50 is not the worst thing in the world. I thought just kind of really would have loved to see sort of 14 touches and a goal and see what that equated to. Sheldrick, really disappointing and one that we've got to take out of our sides. 9 touches, subbed off at half-time. Very disappointing. And Hanley, who replaced him, looked probably better than him. But again, from half a game, just the 27 Supercoach, not one that we should be considering going forward. The Hawks, not as much from a quantity to talk about, but from a quality perspective. She had Will Day, 26 touches, best on ground performance, kicked 3 goals. A bit of a word of warning there because 6 free kicks for and 3 goals for a midfielder does not happen always. Just something that you need to consider when picking him. But he did have the low time on ground and he got the second half tag. So the fact that the lower time on ground shows that he could have gone even more. He's tracking towards 200 at one point. The flip side to that, the fact that he got the attention and was locked down pretty well by JJ, does that mean he's going to get attention most weeks? So you'd expect it to come, especially when they've got the GWS Giants with Bedford, will be going down and locking down on him pretty quickly. Meek, awesome, 30 touches. Again, kicked the 2 goals, so inflates his price a little bit more, but it's great to see him get forward. He does have some really good ruck matchups coming up, so 126 from him. James Sicily, 20 touches and a goal. Did swing forward as expected as the game went on, especially in that last quarter. 92 Supercoach, one that we kind of wanted to swing forward earlier because it'd be great to see him pick up dual position status and be a forward defender for us going forward. Dillmore did Dillmore stuff, 90 from 18 touches and 2 goals. He'll be around the mark of that top 6 forwards again. And a surprise one, Mackenzie, we know he's got some talent, was a high draft pick. Once Warple went off, 16 touches, 7 tackles, and was very prominent in that midfield for 97 Supercoach. It'll be interesting to see how he goes over these next few weeks, why Warple is missing. So that is from a Sydney Hawthorn point of view. As we forward on to a very disappointing Collingwood, got towed up by a fired-up GWS. They were fantastic. And talk about fired up, weren't the coaches fired up on the sidelines? So the Giants, 15-14, 104, smashed the Pies, 6-16, 52. The big new one from there was the GWS midfielder, the guy that turned down the $17 million to be part of the Giants going forward. And that was Finn Callaghan. Had a brilliant game, 33 touches, 2 goals, 2. Did everything he could while Tom Green was out of that side. And, it was a fantastic game of footy, one who's now becoming definitely in a lot of people's minds for their starting Supercoach team. Sam Taylor, we know he's a quality player. Collingwood just kept kicking it to him. It was, they didn't try to change up at any point, which was surprising. Took 13 marks. He also kicked the first goal of the game, so that was a bit of a unique situation. Jelly turned back the clock. 25 handballs in his 36 touches, so he was unreal. Lockie Ash continues to do Lockie Ash stuff over this preseason, 25 touches and 122 Supercoach. Lockie Whitfield with the 111, no surprise, typical Lockie Whitfield game. Brett Daniels, again, will be around the mark, a bit like Dylan Moore, 21 touches, kicked a goal, 101 Supercoach there. And then we've got the cheaper guys, and there were quite a few for the Giants. Weir came on, not a cheaper guy, but did really look good as once he got the opportunity to come on the field. And I think that's bad news for James Leake. 11 touches, kicked a goal. Definitely improved as the game went on in 64, but he is the prime guy to be sub going forward. So really worried for those people. And there's over 50% that have him as that D6 option at the moment. One to watch. And it's hard because he's playing on the Sunday, so we're not going to know if he's going to be named sub until that last moment. But we might need to get our plan there because I feel like he could see that time. Stone did, not too bad, 11 touches, 64 Supercoach, probably the sort of game I was expecting from Stone. Growinski was quite good, 9 touches, kicked the 2 goals, and was a good target them for up in the forward line. Did play some ruck time as well, 61 Supercoach. And the last one was quite disappointing as expected, as I've been saying for a while. I think Cogs is a little cooked, and he only had the 11 touches, 52 Supercoach. From the losing team, it was the Pies with Cameron, who was by far their best player. Does help when the number 1 ruck in Briggs goes off, scoring a 5 early in the game. 22 touches, had the 37 hit-outs, 164 Supercoach. Massive game for Cameron. Dacos in the Josh form, 28 touches, 95 Supercoach. You kind of want, again, that 28 touches to sort of, come up to be sort of in that 105, 110 range. So slightly down there, but his AF to Supercoach was still pretty good. Perryman in the same boat, 27 touches, missed a chance to kick a goal, 93 Supercoach, did enough, probably got the ball a lot more than what I was expecting, down on his tackle numbers, only 3 tackles. Early on, kind of found the ball when probably should have not gone to him. He got a lucky on a couple balls that he picked up from intercepts, but as the game wore on, he looked really comfortable in there, and one that we got to seriously consider for his, for a guy that's like 417 price. So, he's quite good. Allen, 19 touches, 71 Supercoach. Perform well considering, they are missing a couple of soldiers in that midfield as well. Don't know if he's going to be a long-term perspective for us, but worth at least some consideration because of his performance on the day. And then the big one, Nick Dacos, 21 touches still, but only had the 66 Supercoach. So when we look at some of these projections, we'll see how they sort of look, if how much cash we could potentially be getting these players, how much cheaper we could potentially get them for, and also how much higher we could be getting some others for. So we are very lucky here because Nath from the Supercoach Hub has put this together for us on our Supercoach page. So we'll start off with the Sydney Hawthorn game. The big one is Will Day. So 148 first up. So what does the 148 mean? Well, we know he's got a break even of 91. Projection says he's not making that, but let's ignore some of these projections because especially when players are breaking out, they haven't got the history. So Supercoach is only doing off the numbers, and then we can see some of the numbers there. Essendon, he did have that 122 in 2021. Same with the Giants, he had that 137 in 2024, but there's been some poor games. And this all depends, injury and tagging and everything. So Supercoach can only sort of do off the data that they have, but they're sort of season stats. And we look at like 2024 from last season, and we can see there were like injury affected games. He's got a ceiling there of 142, which he obviously smashed out on the weekend. But as the season went on, did have those injury affected games later in the year, and that's where the value comes in from him, 53, 40, and 10. Well, the 53 was actually from a full game. He just copped the attention all day, but the 40 and the 10 injury affected games. So he's there is a reason why he is not at premium price. And we've been waiting for Will Day to kind of break out. This is the season a lot of people are predicting for him to do 148, and just his points per minute were off the chart, 1.6. So definitely somebody worthwhile. Now the big thing here is we've got a projection calculator, so we'll put in what he scored on the weekend, and this is a great tool that Nath has let us use. I do believe it. If you hit him up, he might be available for everyone out there, but. Straight away there, they've got their projections against Essendon, Carlton, GWS, Port Adelaide, quite modest because of those sort of injury-affected games and what he's done in the past. If we take his higher scores, because at least we know he's scored them in the past. So let's go 122 against Essendon, a poor score of 73, higher score. Now, we think he should do much better than that, but if George Hewitt's around, he probably gets some attention there. If Hewitt... if they decide not to tag, it's a kind of a different story. So we can only go off what we've got there. I really should switch these around because we know he's getting attention from Bedford, but let's put his high score of 137 there. Port Adelaide 142. So these are sort of best scenarios of what his history is. A 107 against the Geelong Football Club. And then finally, we'll go these couple of games because this is where it's really important for somebody like Will Day. He does play West Coast, Richmond, Melbourne, all at home. And then he has the Gold Coast Suns, who he has actually performed really well against. So these are his best scores. I think the Richmond and West Coast games, he will go better than what he has listed here. But we'll just start with that as a good place to start off with. So if we calculate these projections, you'll see early on, because of the low score, he actually probably doesn't go up much. So, but it's after his bye where the real issue for people who are probably not looking at starting Will Day or don't have a plan to get him in becomes the issue here, because as you can see here, he starts to creep up towards that 600K mark. So not only making the 100K, which is what we want, but if he's in that season keeper situation. But if he was to cop an injury or, I don't think it's going to be because of form drop off. But if it was more of an injury, you can, side swap him to potentially somebody like a Bont or a Butters because he'll be up at that price. I think more realistically, I think the Blues, as I said, I feel like they've got a good midfield and he gets some attention. So 100, the big one there is the drop off. Let's go the unlucky number. The Cricketers unlucky number 87. Power, I think again, they do have William Drew, so poor score there. But these are the games which I'm more interested in. I think Geelong, he could go really well. I think the Eagles, he could go really well. Richmond, he should absolutely smash. And then, I think that's even fair. Even if we kind of think the Suns are down a little bit. So we put those projections in, and then we see the complete difference there. So he could have an early spike, get himself up 20 odd K in those first couple of weeks, if that's what he sort of 122 or 187. I think they're fair projections. So get up around there. But this is the problem. So if you don't start him, do you have a plan to get him in afterwards? Because if he goes gangbusters against sort of Geelong, West Coast, Richmond in this period, he can definitely fly over that 600K mark. So I think that's not a bad little tool to play around with. If you think, that sort of what could he potentially go on any given week. And you can even go, so here I can just sort of use this, it says all here, but as a rough sort of idea. So if I say, let's just say Will Day goes roughly 110 for the season, and we've taken account the fact that he has already got 148 locked in against the Swannies. So that's the 148. Let's project that going forward. So throughout the year, if he went 110, he's probably going to peak around that 600K mark, and then it just kind of flattens out because as the season goes on, the rookie price players go up in value, the higher players go down, and there is a little bit of balance. So they say roughly by the end of the year, a 110 guy should be around that 590 mark. But yeah, so that's sort of where he'd be. If you think he's going to go higher than that and sort of go, maybe it's roughly 115. Now, this all depends on, it doesn't take into account, obviously, spike games unless you put them in individually, but we'll sort of give it a rough idea of projections. If it's sort of a 115 start, consistent there, you can see there, again, it's going to be around that 600 mark, so on. So nice, a little one to play around with to kind of get a better idea of what somebody like that. But I don't think, unless he comes out and has the real massive game against sort of Essendon and Carlton, you're not going to probably see him spike as highly. If he does go nuts against Essendon and Carlton, there we can see he's probably going to get that 50K rise. But if the Giants do manage to lock him down, and you can see what a difference, even if it's 80, it does stop that cash. So he gets the initial 50K rise if he has two good games there, plateaus out for 3 weeks, and then he restarts again. So not a bad pick because, you might be paying slightly more for him if he goes off really well against Essendon and Carlton. If he does that, it does make it really more harder to get him in for this period of time. If he doesn't, he does start slow, and he again, it's only like sort of a couple of games of 100, you can potentially pick him up, not for that much more expensive, and still get the benefits of a really good player when he hits his softer part of the draw. So I don't mind him as a starting point. The hard thing is that round 4 bye, but I think those projections sort of give you a little bit of an idea. Makes a bit of a different situation because he scored not that much more over his break even. It's 103. I think it would be more of a slow burn for a cash rise, but you're more picking him up as a guy who can challenge those rucks who are more expensive. The ones that are probably interesting are the rookies. So say a Patton, not out of the question that, say, somebody like him could just go 60 each week. We've already seen the 67. I think 60 is a fair sort of projection from a score early on. So if we go sort of we'll take sort of 60 every given week, and then we already know he has a 67 in his score, and we'll show what that kind of looks for everybody. So you'd see that massive price rise after a couple of weeks, 50K, misses again because he's bye, and then it starts to plateau as the season goes out a little bit. But scoring 60s, he should get to that 300K mark, makes us 170K. So as long as he keeps his spot, I don't think that's too far of a projection. Even if it was slightly poorer, and let's just say he goes sort of 50s in that range, and again, the 67 that he's already scored, he'll make a slower build. But again, it should be still at least 130. So I think Patton's a pretty safe pick on that account. All right, if we move on to the other game, because they definitely have some implications here that I know people are looking at. So Finn Callaghan, because he is slightly cheaper, his 144 will mean that he will go up a lot quicker than what we'll say a Will Day will. We do know that he's got that buy in round 2. So it's hard with, again, his projections because, they don't take into account the fact there's no Tom Green out there. Even if Tom Green comes back, we kind of don't know how that's going to sit. So let's just say it is 110, but we know he's got the 144 in his score. Just to give you a rough idea of what we're looking at for a Finn Callaghan. So we project that, and we're going to see that spike early on, so straight after his bye. And the great thing about Callaghan, you can actually bypass him to start the year and maybe trade, say if you start a shorter Perryman and they don't work out, you could definitely go and get one of them in. So that's what we got from Finn Callaghan. And you get that early spike, the 50K, if you were sort of to keep that, maintain that, and you could definitely be up there with one of the premiums. If you then sort of put in where more realistic, so D's 110, not out of the question. The Hawks, well, we did see Heaney and Warner score quite well. So even we go conservative and say it's 100, it is down to Tasmania against the Eagles. He probably goes quite decent. Saints are the same thing. So I don't think that's an unrealistic start those first sort of 5 weeks. Always hard to just keep turning up, but straight away there, he's already up to that sort of 90K making, and he's also his break even still pretty decent, where he's a guy that's going to probably join those ranks of Dawson and Anderson and those sort of guys pretty early. And then if he was to keep going, well, it all depends on playing that M2 role, but just to give you again an idea that the little bit of value that he has in him. Lockie Ash, bit different because he is at 456, so he would have to maintain those sort of 120s to early on to if you want him to bump up. So I don't see him sort of scoring that each week. I think there is an uptick there for his average, but I feel like even if he's sort of a 95 guy, it's probably not going to be enough. 456, especially when we've got other guys who probably can go 1-5, 110 in the back line. And he does have some hit and miss games. He said a history of that. So we can leave that alone. Some people have asked me about Sam Taylor. If Sam Taylor was sort of 284, I'd be like, yeah, let's do this. But 384, again, it's not that big of a drop off for what Callaghan is. And is he scoring 139 each week? Probably not. On the Collingwood side of things, however, Darcy Cameron, he's definitely one we need to talk about. Season average of break even of 105. The hard thing is he's very expensive, but he has got a history here against Port Adelaide where he's gone 110, 135, 137. And he did score against Tim English last time a 118. So it's not out of the question. The problem is this is not like some people looking at maybe a season keeper. I don't think so. I think there's better rucks. Short-term play where you could potentially start a Cameron for a couple of weeks and then move him to a Finn Callaghan type and then free up some cash doing that, not out of the question. So we do know he's got a 164 in his score. Now, the hard thing is because he's already so expensive, this cash rise is probably not going to be much. But they're predicting a 119 against Port. No other question. We'll just round it up. Round number 120, 105. So we'll just see what that does for the first couple of weeks to see if it makes it viable. The problem there, because of he's already priced, he's actually only going up 6K. So you would need a situation where he goes maybe a 140 against Port. As I said, not completely out of the question. He's top there's 137. So let's go 135. So not completely out of the question there that he could go a 135 against Port Adelaide, especially if it's just him sole rucking. And then the last time against Tim English, let's just take it at 115. Let's just say he has a really good game, 115, dominates English in the actual hit-outs, and then all of a sudden it's a 22K rise. Is that enough to then go down to a Finn Callaghan to waste that trade just to get that one score? Probably not. So few people have been asking about that with the fact that he's got the 164 in his score. Yeah, not. So that I think that rules that out completely. Perryman, again, a cheaper player, so the projections are quite different. The first game having that lower score, even though he did find the ball quite a lot, but it's still decent. It's not through the roof, but it is higher than his projections. So Perryman getting a 93 has a little bit of history here. Port, he has scored a 107 before, 99 against the Dogs, but it is a different role. So I think it's not out of the question where he couldn't just go 100 against those guys playing in the midfield. So let's just say it's 100 for the 2 games before his bye, and we'll just sort of see how that projects. And Perryman could get a 30K boost there. If you kind of think he's going to go, maybe he's a 100 guy going on, where does that sort of fit him in going forward, and sort of see where he ends up in regards to price projections. So if you think Perryman's on kind of a 100 guy, he'll make 100K. And in there he'll probably have a spike game. He'll have a couple lower games, but as a 100 averaging guy, he gets into that sort of 520 mark, makes 100K for us. and hopefully he gets an uptick and becomes more of a keeper to sort of be in that keeper range. We probably really need him going 105. So if you still think he's got the ability to do that, and as we said, he found the ball fine. We know he can tackle, and then you'll see it's a slow burn, but he'll get up there around sort of those premium numbers. Even if you, and this is more, I guess, if he cops an injury or if you think there's better midfielders that you kind of want to pivot to. But, the worst case scenario, we want a guy who's going to make 100K for us. And he can do that. So he either becomes a season keeper, we have him locked in our defense. And if he doesn't, well, it's not the end of the world. It costs you a trade that you can, potentially side swap to a guy that's sort of dropped a little bit cash. Maybe it's a who we got in the defense there, Nick Martin, or maybe he's even a Whitfield or someone like that, who maybe they, as the season goes on, just plateau out a little bit. The big one here is Nick Dacos. So the 66. Now, the hard thing with all of these scores, because they are in their first score, so they do drop out quite quickly. And he scores in the past against Port 133. He's got a 149. The Bulldogs, he's got a couple massive scores there, 156 or 139. The Carlton 150s beefed up a little bit because of that performance in the last 15 minutes. Hewitt usually does a pretty decent job on him. So some people, because of that 66, aren't looking at starting Dacos. Now his percentage is dropping. I wasn't looking at him anyway. But we need to now take into account what's this 66 going to look at going forward. So they have some massive projections for Dacos in here, and rightly so, because the guy is an absolute superstar. So no surprise. So if it is a situation where they think he's going to rebound, go 137, 138, 125, go through the roof, he actually, slightly down and then starts actually going up and sort of gets around that 660 mark, if he can sort of do that. If we kind of take his average against opponents, so I think that's a fair little estimate. Now, obviously, most players, they're going to have their first couple of years, they're not going to score so well. Dacos has come into the system and just dominated from day one. So I think some of these averages against opponents are a little bit more fairer compared to if it was somebody else. So a 114, a 121, 95, as I said, struggles against Carlton. I think 100s, maybe even 105. I think that's a fair against the Blues because they usually do a job on him. 86 against the Swans. I'm happy to give him a little bit of an uptick. I think he should do reasonably well against Jordan, but at the same time, Jordan is one of the better defenders in the taggers in the game. And then we'll just go as far as Brisbane because I think that score against the Bombers is a little bit unfair because we do know he plays pretty well on Anzac Day. So we'll go a 112. Probably one of these games being Dacos, he probably spikes even better. But if you kind of have a look at what that sort of sits at, he's not going to really drop that much. He probably gets down to 600K. It's not a big drop. We actually need him to have a game like against, say, the Bulldogs or Carlton, have another really poor game. Even if it's, let's just take the Sydney game, for example. If he comes out and sort of had a 70 against the Swans, now we're starting to see that big drop. And because of where it is, he would then start to get into that 580 range. He's not dropping that much money. So if you think Dacos is still ready to go, fine. If you want him later on and you're sort of aiming for that sort of Anzac Day period, I feel like there's a situation where you're probably going to get him a little bit cheaper, but it's not going to be that much more cheaper, but it's still, it's not like you're going to have to pay overs to go and get him. So I don't see a world now because of that 66 he's going to go really over that 630. Just we need another poorer game later on to sort of if we want this guy to drop down in the 580. So I think some people are saying I'm going to pick Dacos up for 550 unless he really came out against Port Adelaide and had another stinker. So if we sort of put a couple 70s in there, but we know he's good enough to probably go a couple bigger scores, you kind of then we'll see the bigger drop, and all of a sudden it's we're still getting down closer to that sort of 580, but it's still probably not enough because I feel like he'll still have games 110. We'd need a situation here where he'd probably just have to do hundreds, and if you think he's not immortal anymore and he's not going to have such a great time, then we might get a stage where he gets down the 540s. But I think those projections would be way too low for a Nick Dacos unless he was playing with some serious injuries and, was getting probably, he was subbed off early in the game. So, yeah, again, I think he's at worst case, he slightly drops under 600. So if you're going to bring him in later on, you kind of need a plan of, what's it going to take for him to score there. The last one is a couple of these rookies. So we'll use Connor Stone because it's a great example, because a lot of players are in that 119 range with a break even of 120 to so you can kind of plan of what a guy like that could potentially make for us this year. So there's sort of different projections. It's always going to be hard, but we know at least he's got a first score in he's at least got a score in here so far in the 60s, which is good. So it gives us something to work with. So that's 64. So if we sort of go with, even if we only think he's sort of going to average 50, that again, that's sort of going to still make us enough cash that we're going to able to go one up, one down at some point soon. So averaging 50, he's a guy who be a slow burn, but by the time the buys kick around, he's going to get to 250. He's going to make us 120K. If you're a little bit more bullish and you think, this guy could sort of go closer to 60 during this time, he might have a good game. He might have a couple of poor games, but just as a sort of a rough idea, there you go. You've got Connor Stone getting up to around that 300K mark. And that'd be great, because if you drop him down, you make 200K from him, and then you chuck 200K on another rookie that's hopefully made around the same mark, and that's how you get your premium. So just give you a bit of an idea of what these projections. So guys who have had like your Darcy Cameron, so people are now jumping on because, he's got a 164. Yeah, it's not as good as you think. And then Dacos, the 66, it's actually not as bad as we think. You really need the guys, that's actually the mid-value guys that these scores affect a lot more. So a little bit of a heads up, bit of a warning there, because I have heard some of the conversation so far this preseason. So I hope you kind of enjoyed that little bit of in-depth about the two games that we've had so far. Hope that helps you when you're sort of deciding on which players you want to put in and what you take out. It would have been great to have sort of a 250, say a Hugh Garcia or a Flynn in that price range come out and score like 100, 120, because that would have changed everything. There weren't really any players in this game, these two games, that did that. So that was a bit disappointing, but we can only work with what we'll work with. All right, guys, we'll have team videos coming to you soon. I think Chris has already got his team video out, and as we count down to the start of the round 1 and Supercoach season. Thanks, guys. Bye.